The last few minutes of this debate take you live now for coverage of the road to the White House from Meredith, New Hampshire, 40 miles north of Concord, where we're going to be hearing from Texas Congressman Ron Paul. He's taking the stage, and he'll be joined by his son, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, at this town hall meeting.
I thought after 2 days of debates you'd be tired of politics. But we're just getting started. We're looking forward to Tuesday for sure. But before we get started, I wanted to introduce several members of my family. This is my wife, Carol. You might have received some greetings from her. She sent out a lot of cookbooks here lately. But also, daughter-in-law Peggy is here, and her daughter, Linda. And we also had the arrival of a son who celebrated his birthday yesterday, Senator Rand Paul.
So I'm State Senator Jim Forsyth. I'm from the Lakes region right below you guys, right down Laconia, Alton, Guilford. It's an honor to be hosting. I'm Dr. Paul's campaign chairman in New Hampshire. We also have Senator Sanborn on board and Senator White. So we're glad to have support of so many senators. I really got the honor of working with Rand Paul back in 2007 when he was campaigning for his dad. And I got to really know him well because we were driving around, and he is a true believer. He is someone who, at that time, did not want to run. He didn't want to run for office. He had a successful practice. He was a family man, and but I think he saw the call to duty, and he ran, and we're so happy that he did because he's done a fantastic job. And Senator Rand Paul will introduce his father.
Thank you. Thank you. What a crowd. What a crowd. Anybody here for Ron Paul already? All right. All of you here for Ron Paul, just be quiet, and I'll try to get to the undecideds then. No, we'll take whatever cheers and approval we can get. Many years ago, Reagan was getting ready to go to a summit with Gorbachev. And he told his staff he was going to tell this story. And his staff said, oh, no, if you do it, there'll be an international incident. And Reagan did anyway, went ahead and told this story. And it seems that there was an accountant in Moscow. And this accountant had wanted to buy a car. So he saved up his money for years and years because nobody had much money in the Soviet Union. There was only one car dealer. It was the state. It was a crummy piece of crap car, but it was a car nonetheless. So he saved for years and years, and he went into the state dealership, and he put his money down, and the surly bureaucrat said, well, that's all good and well. Come back in 10 years, and you can pick up your car. And the accountant didn't miss a beat. He said, well, will that be on a Tuesday or a Wednesday? And the surly bureaucrat looked at him and said, I told you it'll be 10 years. You want to know if it'll be a Tuesday or Wednesday? He said, yeah, the plumber's coming on Wednesday, and I don't want to miss him. Now, when I first started telling that story, I thought, well, people in America won't get it because how could we ever conceive of the government owning our car dealerships and our car manufacturers? But you know the new acronym or the new abbreviation for GM, right? Government Motors. We've come a long way, but we've been going a long way really in the wrong direction. We've been going towards the government owning businesses, owning banks, bailing out people who made bad decisions. Anybody here think that a banker who makes $100 million a year on Wall Street or $10 million a year on Wall Street, if he makes a bad decision and he's going bankrupt, that we should bail him out so he gets a $10 million bonus the next year? Anybody believe that? I got started running as part of the Tea Party movement in 2010 because I was unhappy with Republicans. I was unhappy with Republicans who doubled the debt under George Bush, who doubled the size of the Department of Education, and then had the audacity to vote for this bank bailout. So that's why I got involved. People say, you can't run and say Republicans are doing a bad job and get elected as a Republican, but I guess you can because it makes a difference what kind of Republican we get. I tell people, the Republican Party is an empty vessel unless we imbue it with values. Now, you've got a lot of candidates running around New Hampshire saying they're Reagan conservatives. But Reagan would be rolling over in his grave to hear people say they're Reagan conservatives when they voted to double the size of the Department of Education, which half of them on the stage did, when they supported an individual mandate, the linchpin of Obamacare, when they supported foreign aid around the world, all of these things are inconsistent with the conservative wing of our party. There's only been one candidate who through the years has voted against the spending bills, against the appropriation bills, who has voted for a balanced budget amendment, who has opposed and never voted for any budget that wasn't balanced. Now some of them will say, oh, I never voted for Planned Parenthood. Everyone on the stage voted for all those budgets that always had money for Planned Parenthood. Now they put in a line saying, oh, the money won't go for abortion. They all voted for the budget anyway because they were a rubber stamp. They never had the courage to say no. But there has been somebody in Washington who's had the courage to vote no, who's been one of the few candidates who has voted no, sometimes even by himself. There's only been one candidate in Washington who's never been accused of flip-flopping. There's only been one candidate in Washington who the lobbyists don't even bother to come to his office. And there's only one candidate, and this is the anomaly that bugs the heck out of people, and they can't understand it. They can't understand this narrative because they want to paint Ron Paul as someone who doesn't believe in a strong national defense, and it's absolutely untrue. You know who the soldiers trust with their money and their contributions more than any other candidate? Good answer. There's only one candidate in the race who's gotten more contributions from active duty soldiers than all of the other candidates combined. And I think a soldier, a young man or woman who puts their life on the line, who sends a contribution, and a lot of them have been sending them to Ron Paul, shows that there are many soldiers who are thoughtful about going to war. That war isn't always the answer. They will fight for their country. They've volunteered to go to and fight for their country. But they're thoughtful about it. They're very thoughtful about it, and they know that they're putting their life on the line, and they want to have a commander-in-chief who will have the same thoughtfulness. And I give you that new and hopefully commander-in-chief, my father, Ron Paul.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pretty soon he's going to be able to get up on a stage and give a pretty good speech, don't you think? Well, we're going to have a little different format. I'm not going to start off with a long speech, but the format will be that Jim will ask me a few questions, and then we'll get some questions from the audience.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. So you served in Congress for 12 terms, which is quite a long time, but you were practicing medicine before that, and you've continued to practice medicine since that. What was practicing medicine like in those days, and how have you seen it change, and how's that influence how you feel about government approach to medicine?
Well, that's one thing that I have witnessed, the change in the medical practice. I went to college in the 50s and started medical school in 57 and graduated in end of 1960. But finished a couple years of residency and then did some practice before government was very much involved in medicine. That was before Medicaid, before Medicare, and there was just minimal government. Government, took care of veterans and some others. But then in the 60s, LBJ, I don't know if you remember him or not, but he claimed that we could have guns and butter. Of course, they were fighting the Vietnam War, but at the same time, the butter was that he had to make sure that everybody was taken care of, so he introduced this idea that the federal government had to take over medical care, and subsequently over these last decades, he has done that. But we have seen a dramatic change. The most important negative is that the cost of medicine has skyrocketed. The second negative, it has destroyed virtually the doctor-patient relationship. And third, it's introduced not socialized medicine, but corporate medicine. We don't have government really running things and owning it. That would be very, very bad. But corporate medicine isn't a whole lot better. So we have corporations. Drug companies become powerful lobbyists. The insurance companies, there's powerful lobbyists. And the medical profession, powerful lobbyists, and the management company. So it's a dramatic change. But the little bit of experience I had in the early 60s was in a Catholic hospital. And all I remember is I didn't get paid very much because I was, I was covering an emergency room and wanted to make a couple dollars. I was moonlighting while I was in the military. But the one thing I noticed is everybody got taken care of, and people who could pay, they paid. Nobody was turned away. But people, received medical care. It wasn't like a period of time, whether it was in the 50s and early 60s, that I recall that people were lying out in the streets and not getting medical care. It was just delivered differently now. But now we have introduced a changed medical system where, the quality goes down, the cost goes up, and everybody is unhappy. The patients grow unhappy, and it's going to get so much worse with Obamacare. So I think a good way to start, once we sort of take over things in Washington, will be to get rid of Obamacare and make sure the control of medicine is returned to you, the citizen, the patient.
And Dr.
Maybe we can stay up. Good suggestion.
Okay, and so your budget plans to cut $1 trillion in the first year and balance the budget in 3. It stands in stark contrast to a lot of the other candidates. Why do you feel that cutting spending is important? A lot of people say that we need to spend more in order to stimulate the economy.
Well, actually, the country doesn't spend less. The government spends less when you cut the federal budget. The people get to spend more. And when the people spend the money, they spend it with a much better, much more wisdom than when the government spends it. The government, actually, we lose twice. If they take $1 trillion out of our pockets, you lose $1 trillion. If the government spends $1 trillion, they usually spend it getting us into trouble, whether it's overseas spending, that's a waste, or if they spend it on bureaucrats, that's a waste. That's putting more pressure on us, and then we have to have additional expenses for overcoming the bureaucracy. So I think we really lose twice that way. But we need to cut $1 trillion. If we're serious. The proposed cuts so far aren't really cuts. They're cuts on proposed increases. They have what they call baseline budgeting. The budget goes up automatically at a certain rate. And if you cut $1 trillion over 10 years, that's $100 billion per year that they're going to cut on the proposed increases. But today, let's just compare. $100 billion a year cut on the proposed increases versus what's happening today. The budget's going up $100 billion of real costs every month. So that is a fantasy. It has nothing to do with cuts. And nobody's talking about it. Right now, they're nearly hysterical about some of these mandated cuts because of the super committee. They're talking about cuts, and Obama mentioned they were going to cut something out of the military. There are no cuts proposed, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. They're only cuts on these wild proposed increases. They're not willing to admit that this country can't continue to run up a deficit of $1.5 trillion a year. It's growing exponentially, and if we're serious, we have to get the federal government out of our wallets and out of our lives, and we have to let the people spend the money. Then we have a much better chance of regaining prosperity.
Now, Dr. Paul, I served in the Air Force, and I flew KC-135s for Bosnia and doing the no-fly zone for Iraq between the Gulf Wars. So I'm somebody who saw firsthand that there's a big difference between defense and overseas military spending. A lot of the things we were involved in weren't defending our country. Can you talk about, I think it's $500 billion of your trillion gets cut. Is that military spending, defense spending, and what would defense look like under a Paul presidency?
I think this is a very important point, because as soon as you talk about cutting